Hey, John Heilman, let's pull back and see what, I'd love to get your take on 2 weeks of conventions and where we find ourselves going into September with what used to be seen traditionally as the start of campaign season. I think you've proven that these elections in years past, with a lot of your reporting, are won or lost in April and May. I don't know that that's the case now. A lot of tight polls out there. But where are we after 2 weeks of conventions? How did the Democrats do? How did the Republicans respond? How's this campaign set up for the fall?
Joe, I think, I think our verdict at the end of last week on the Democratic convention still stands, and I think Democrats feel good about what they got done. I'd say, in this week, which is obviously more, but right now worth thinking about, I'm curious to hear what you thought about Trump's speech last night. Talking to Democrats all week long this week, everybody was critical of a variety of things that Republicans did this week, but purely from the standpoint of political operatives who were paying attention to this race, to this convention, there was a sense of nervousness on the part of Democrats who had seen polls tightening in the battleground states and thought that by the standards of what the Trump campaign was trying to do in this convention, that they had a pretty successful first 3 days of the convention, focused on trying to soften Trump's image, working on the problem that they have with women in the suburbs, obviously throwing a lot of red meat to the base, trying to portray Biden in the frame that they have now kind of settled on. It's a tough frame, this kind of bank shot of Biden's not a leftist and an anarchist, but he's the puppet of leftists and anarchists. But they were making that argument. And then last night came along, and I heard a large collective exhalation of relief, because I think that the view of Trump's speech last night was, in addition to the optics we talked about earlier, that the speech itself was bad. I mean, was long, was boring. Trump did not seem, he's always bad on teleprompter. He likes, as you know, he likes to riff. He likes to extemporize. They did not want him to do that last night, clearly. A 70-minute speech where he did not have that much energy through most of it. He, as you know, he also has trouble reading. So the speech was delivered in a kind of halting way. And two other things about it that were, one of them was that the critique of Biden, he mentioned Joe Biden 41 times last night. In 2016, he mentioned Hillary Clinton 15 or 16 times, and that seemed like a lot. He mentioned Joe Biden 41 times last night, and the critique of Biden was so over the top, was so hyperbolic, that it lost a lot of its force. It seemed like it was so exaggerated, and you wondered whether it was really going to move anybody who wasn't already in the MAGA camp. And then the second thing I'd say, he went through this entire week, Joe, 4 days. He has never managed to utter the name Jacob Blake. Not a moment where he expressed sympathy for Jacob Blake, for the family. Not a moment where he raised any questions about the police behavior there. The only discussion of Kenosha last night was around the question of Democrat-run cities on fire, the dystopian view. And I think, if you think about the NBA protests on Wednesday, you think about what Americans are seeing on their television screens, who saw that video. I think he seemed incredibly out of touch and out of step with the reality of what's going on in this country related to race. And that is a huge part of his problem in the suburbs and in the swing states, is that people look at him on the question of race, which is so central in American life right now, and say, this dude is so far out of touch. And I think those were all problems that made the last day of their convention, the day that Donald Trump looked forward to more than any other, maybe the worst of the 4 days, and took away maybe some of the gains that they felt like that it seemed like they might have racked up over the course of these first 3 days. I thought yesterday in that speech did them no good at all.
Yeah, the Democrats coming into this week were very concerned that they would throw everything at Joe Biden, that somehow something would land. It didn't land. I don't think they landed any punches. First of all, as you said, because unlike, let's say, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump is very bad on the teleprompter. I certainly understand why his staff would have him reading from a teleprompter from the White House instead of just going on riffs. But looking back, he would have been better just going on riffs and having one of his, I mean, if he had themes to follow, if he had promises that he was going to make for the second term, that would be one thing. But there are no new themes or new promises. So, yeah, that didn't make any sense. And I want to touch on something else here that you said, and I can't repeat this enough. The Trump campaign is making a terrible mistake with their hyperbolic attacks on Joe Biden. They're overselling the case. People know Biden. If you want to say he's a bumbler, sometimes he says stupid things, sometimes he stumbles around, and he's been doing it for 40 years, that's fine. But these hyperbolic attacks that he's Stalin or that he's, Che Guevara or something like this. This is a guy who's been attacked for being too cozy with banks and credit card companies and Delaware corporations his entire career. So people know Joe Biden. That doesn't work. And the parallel to that, as I've already said before, it's what Jimmy Carter's team did to Ronald Reagan. They kept calling him an extremist. They kept saying he was going to start World War III. They kept saying that he was, the crazed man on the missile at the end of Dr. Strangelove. And then people saw Reagan. They were like, no, he's not. He seems like a kind of nice guy to me. They're doing the same thing to Biden.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.